You are walking down a crowded street. Someone falls. 20 people see it happen. Nobody moves. You've seen this before, maybe even lived it. You've told yourself it's because people are cruel. That's not it. The real answer is far stranger. It has nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with a switch buried deep in your brain that flips the moment a crowd gets big enough. Your ancestors didn't have this problem. For most of human history, you knew everyone around you. If someone in your group of 30 collapsed, there was no diffusion, no confusion, no waiting for someone else to act. You were the someone else. Anthropologists studying small-scale hunter-gatherer societies have consistently found that group sizes rarely exceeded a few dozen people who lived, hunted, and raised children together for an entire lifetime. In a group that size, everyone's actions were visible. Everyone's inaction was visible too. There was nowhere to hide inside a crowd, because there was no crowd. There was only your people. Today, you might stand in a crowd of hundreds and feel nothing pulling you forward. What changed? Not your character, your math. In 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was murdered in New York, while according to early reports, dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The story turned out to be more complicated than the headlines claimed, but it launched two psychologists, John Darley and Bibb Latané, into a set of experiments that would rewrite what we understand about human behavior in groups. What they found wasn't a story about apathy. It was a story about arithmetic. Darley and Latané put people in a room, alone, and told them they were having a discussion over an intercom with other participants. Then someone on the intercom started having what sounded like a seizure. When the subject believed they were the only other person listening, 85% of them rushed to help within a minute. When they believed 4 other people were also listening, that number collapsed to 31%. Same emergency, same sounds of distress, completely different outcome. The only thing that changed was how many other people the subject believed were also watching. Notice what didn't change. The subjects in the 4-listener condition weren't colder people. They weren't less empathetic. Many of them, according to the researchers' own notes, showed visible physical signs of distress while sitting frozen in their chairs, sweating, hands trembling, unable to make themselves move. Their bodies wanted to help. Something upstream of conscious choice was holding them in place. That's the part that should unsettle you. This isn't a decision you make. It's a decision made for you. Milliseconds before you're even aware one was required. This is the bystander effect, and it isn't a flaw in your wiring. It's a feature that made perfect sense for most of your evolutionary history. When responsibility could be shared, your ancestors' brains learned to distribute it. If 10 people were capable of acting, the pressure on any one person to act alone dropped. That's not laziness. That's a survival calculation running quietly beneath your awareness, built for a world where groups were small enough that someone always did step up. Here's what's stranger. The bigger the crowd, the less any single person feels responsible, and the less any single person believes their help is even needed. Diffusion of responsibility is only half of it. The other half is called pluralistic ignorance, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. You look around at the other people not reacting, and you read their calm as information. If this were really an emergency, you think, surely someone else would already be doing something. Everyone in the crowd is having that exact same thought at the exact same moment. Nobody is doing anything, which convinces everybody else that nothing needs to be done. Think about the last time you saw a phone light up with a notification everyone ignored, or a person standing alone looking distressed while a hallway of people walked past without a glance. You weren't watching indifference. You were watching 100 silent calculations happening in parallel, each one anchored to the calm expression on the face next to it. This is why smoke-filled rooms make such a strange test case in psychology. In one classic version of the experiment, researchers pumped smoke into a room where a participant sat filling out a questionnaire. Alone, most people got up and reported it within 2 minutes. Surrounded by actors instructed to stay calm and keep writing, most participants sat there too, glancing sideways, breathing in haze, waiting for someone else's face to confirm that something was actually wrong. Some kept writing even as the room grew hard to see across. Nobody wanted to be the one who overreacted. Everyone would rather cough quietly than stand out loudly, and so, An entire room of people who each privately suspected danger sat frozen behind a mask of collective calm. The psychologist Solomon Asch demonstrated something eerily similar back in the 1950s, though his experiments had nothing to do with emergencies. He showed people a simple line-length comparison, something so obvious a child could get it right. But when actors in the room confidently gave the wrong answer first, over a third of real participants abandoned the evidence in front of their own eyes and agreed with the group. Not because they were fooled, because being the lone dissenting voice against a calm, unified crowd is one of the most uncomfortable positions a human being can occupy. Your ancestors who broke from the group risked exile, and exile for most of human history meant death. That fear didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Now it shows up as hesitation in a hallway instead of banishment from a tribe. So why does this matter today more than ever? Because you don't just live in crowds on the street anymore. You live inside the biggest crowd that has ever existed, and you carry it in your pocket. Every time you scroll past a post asking for help, a comment calling something out, a stranger clearly struggling in a video, you are the person on the intercom. Except now there are millions of other listeners instead of 4. The math has gotten so extreme that the pressure to act has been diluted almost to nothing. Researcher Latané later expanded this into what he called social impact theory, showing that the effect of any single bystander shrinks not just with the number of people present, but with the intensity and immediacy of the situation itself. A screen adds distance. Distance shrinks urgency. Urgency is what used to save lives. Consider how many live-streamed emergencies now unfold in front of viewer counts in the tens of thousands, where comments fill with concern and almost nobody actually calls anyone. The viewer count itself becomes the diffusion mechanism. 30,000 people watching feels, to each individual brain in that audience, exactly like 30,000 other people who have surely already handled it. Your ancestors never had to process a number that large in a social context. Their brains had no evolved response calibrated for a crowd of 30,000, so it defaults to the same rule it always used for a crowd of 30. Someone else has this. But here's the twist your brain doesn't expect. Knowing about the bystander effect is one of the only things proven to weaken its grip on you. Darley and Latané found that when people were educated about diffusion of responsibility beforehand, they were significantly more likely to intervene later, even in unrelated situations. The mechanism loses power the moment you can name it. That's rare. Most cognitive biases don't work that way. You can know all about confirmation bias and still fall for it an hour later. But bystander paralysis seems to dissolve, at least partially, once you recognize the exact moment it's happening to you. There's a specific trick trained responders and psychologists recommend, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Instead of shouting, "Somebody help," you point at one specific person and say, "You, in the blue jacket, call an ambulance." The diffusion collapses instantly. Responsibility, which had been smeared across a crowd of strangers, lands on one identifiable person, and identifiable people act the way your ancestors always did, because for almost all of human history, help was never anonymous. It had a face attached to it. It had your name attached to it. Think about how much of modern life runs on anonymous crowds instead of named individuals. Group chats where nobody replies because everyone assumes someone else will. Community problems where everyone waits for a mysterious someone to fix them. Even your own household, where a mess sits untouched because it belongs to everyone and therefore, somehow, to no one. The bystander effect isn't just about emergencies on sidewalks. It's the quiet architecture behind every situation where responsibility gets so spread out that it evaporates. Workplaces run on this same hidden current. Send an email to one person and it gets answered within the hour. Send that identical email to 5 people at once and it can sit for days because each recipient assumes the other 4 are more qualified, more available, or already replying. Committees exist partly because groups can share credit, but they also quietly rely on this same diffusion to survive, since no single member ever has to carry the full weight of a decision. None of this is laziness in the way you've been taught to think about laziness. It's the exact same ancient circuitry that once helped your ancestors avoid burning energy on a threat someone else was already handling, now misfiring constantly in a world built entirely out of crowds. Your ancestors survived in groups small enough that everyone's contribution was visible and impossible to hide from. You now live in groups so large that invisibility is the default setting, and that invisibility feels safe right up until it's the reason nobody, including you, ever steps forward. So the next time you're standing in a crowd, physical or digital, and something feels wrong, remember what's actually happening in your head. You are not calculating whether you care. You are calculating whether everyone else already has it covered. That calculation is ancient, automatic, and almost always wrong in a world this large. Your ancestors were never punished for trusting that calculation because in a group of 30, it was almost always correct. You live inside groups of thousands and millions now, and the same trustworthy old instinct has quietly become one of the least reliable tools in your entire mental toolkit. The fix isn't heroism. It isn't some permanent transformation into a braver version of yourself. It's smaller and stranger than that. It's picking one face out of the crowd. It's saying a name instead of shouting into a void. It's noticing, just for a second, that the silence around you isn't proof nothing is wrong. Only proof that everyone is waiting on everyone else. The one thing that seems to interrupt this ancient calculation is exactly what you just did. You named it. You watched something that flipped the switch and made an invisible mechanism visible, and mechanisms that are visible are so much harder to fall for. Tonight, when you scroll past someone who needs a reply or walk past someone who needs a hand, you might notice a half-second pause where the old calculation used to run silently underneath you. That pause is new. That pause is yours. And it might be the only difference between watching and acting.